The time has finally come to discuss the Kingdom Cup meta. With me, we got special guests today, Long Furby and Mothman over here. If you're not familiar, Mothman is real, and he's into Pokemon Go PvP. So without further ado, let's talk about the Kingdom Cup, the meta simplified. So this content has definitely been a long time coming. I did cover basically all of this info about 2-3 weeks ago on my live stream SwagTips, but because the live stream was so choppy, I wanted to do a retake of it before I'd put the content on YouTube, and I kept saying I'd do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow kept coming until we got to today. So the content's finally here, yeah. So let's talk about the Kingdom Cup, right? Yeah, and then this graphic here is from GamePress. It was actually developed by Lorma96. Even though my name is on the graphic, I only really helped with organizing it a bit. Lorma did like 99.99% of the work here, so definitely big shout out to Lorma96 for making the graphic look so nice, and for doing all the legwork here as far as the information goes. You can get all this info and then some from the GamePress article, the Kingdom Cup meta, on GamePress, link in the description if you want to check that out. So in today's video, I'm going to be covering the basic pentafecta here of the Kingdom Cup, and then tonight on my live stream SwagTips, I'm going to be covering the more wild card alternative counters. So this video will be part 1, and then the part 2 will be coming on YouTube, hopefully, in the next few days. Alright, so let's get into it here. The Kingdom Cup. There are 2 key Pokemon that kind of rule the Kingdom Cup, and that is Lucario and Bastidon. You can think of Lucario as being the sword, and Bastidon being the shield. Pokemon Sword and Shield confirmed? Probably. Actually it was, like weeks before making this video, right? Yeah. So, big thing with Lucario is that it has counter and power-up punch, which allows it to brutalize basically everything in the Kingdom Cup meta. The main things that don't really mind it too much are the flying types. So, that's why flying types are here as like primary counters to the Lucario. And then when it comes to the Bastidon, the shield, even though the shield can't block the sword because the sword is fighting type and Bastidon is rock steel, making it double weak to fighting type, it basically defends against most things that give Lucario trouble. We got Smackdown. Smackdown means these flying types don't want to deal with this guy. And because of the rock steel typing, these guys really can't land an effective hit on the Bastidon, making it excellent for smashing things that give Lucario trouble. So if you are able to have a Lucario and or a Bastidon, these are 2 Pokemon that you definitely want to focus on getting because they are by far the supreme options for this cup. Unfortunately for many players, including myself, I don't have a Bastidon or a Lucario. Yeah, Lucario, wow. Lucario is actually like supremely premium as far as Pokemon goes. Link in the description to a Reddit post that details just how ridiculously hard and costly even it can be to get a single Riolu. So trying to get a single Riolu is a bit ridiculous for most players, let alone getting a full-fledged Lucario with the extra move unlocked, so that's pretty rough going there. And then as far as Bastidon goes, Bastidon's just really rare for most players. So yeah, so if you don't have these guys, you are going to be struggling a bit, but there are options. So if you're lacking Bastidon, Melmetal can make a great alternative to it. Handling basically everything Bastidon does and still losing to things similar to Bastidon. So no real concerns there if you don't have the Bastidon. But if you don't have Lucario, nothing's really filling its shoes, and that's a bit unfortunate there. So one such Pokemon that can handle both Lucario and Bastidon, if you are up against these Ultra Chad players that have all the best Pokemon already powered up and unlocked with all the special moves, where do they get them from? Oh my gosh. Well, Blaziken is actually a supremely good option for handling both of these threats. Why? Because it has counter. So counter wails on Lucario, who is steel type, doesn't appreciate getting hit with counter itself, and then rock steel type, doubly weak to fighting type damage. Blaziken beats it down. So even though Blaziken really won't be using its charge moves to deal with these guys, like it could, it's got really expensive charge moves on its hands, so kind of rough going there. But it doesn't have to. Yeah, it just has the fast move damage. And then kind of a plus beating these 2 Omega threats with just the fast move damage is that when you finally do get to that nuke charge move, you can save it for later in the fight and just dump it on something. Or you could just whip it out knowing that your opponent will want to shield it because it'll dump on them. So the ability to counter 2 of the biggest threats in the meta and dump on things, maybe force a shield with your charge move, I think that's pretty good and definitely worth an inclusion in any team. Doubly so if you are missing either Lucario or Bastidon, just because you're going to have to try to fill that gap in your team. Best way to fill it is with the meta smasher here, the Blaziken. Yeah. And next to Blaziken, in Blaziken's corner here, is Flygon. Now, Flygon doesn't handle Lucario well in a 1v1 kind of situation. Lucario will have the advantage because of the counter damage, but does beat down on Bastidon and Melmetal here, so that's definitely worth the inclusion. It can also rain on Blaziken's Parade. Another cool thing that Flygon has going for it is that it can threaten Altaria and Charizard with the Dragon Claw damage. So a pretty versatile Pokemon. Problem that it has is that it's a little bit fragile, so you can't just whip it out and expect it to put in work all the time, but because of its speed and coverage, it can put in some serious work. And if it's got Lucario on the back foot a little bit, well, then you might be able to take down Lucario with the Flygon, even though Lucario should have the advantage in that matchup. Yeah. And then just like how Blaziken is kind of a must-have for any team, especially so if you're missing one of these two Omega threats, well, if you're missing both of these Omega threats, then the best way you can handle the meta would be to pair up Blaziken with Flygon. The team won't be as explicitly potent as Lucario plus Bastidon, but you will be able to handle Lucario Bastidon cores, and then also handle the rest of the meta between these two boys, and then whoever else combos with them. When it comes to the Air Force, as Lorma likes to put it, yeah, the Air Force, pretty dominated by these Steel-type boys over here, but the main reason why they're included is because they can deal with Blaziken, for the most part handle Flygon, and then also beat down the Lucario. I will say that in some situations, Altaria doesn't exactly win against Lucario. It doesn't exactly lose either. It's a little bit more flaky than how Charizard has it going on. But because Altaria is just so good against everything, except for these guys over here, that's the main reason why it's here. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that any cup, any league, anything that includes Altaria, as long as it's Great League, Altaria is going to show up as being one of the topmost threats for those. So definitely whip out that Stardust and get a good Altaria going if you don't already, because time and time again, Altaria is proving to be a potent force in the Great League meta in general. Of course, we got Charizard, and Charizard is Flying Fire type, right? So Fire type damage dumps on this guy, and because of the Flying type giving it resistances, it can also handle these guys. And then once again, you do have that Dragon Claw backup damage to handle Altaria a little bit and handle Flygon a little bit more easily. It doesn't exactly give you a winning matchup against Altaria, but it does make Altaria be a little bit nervous about coming into the Charizard fight. You might waste some shields, you might put in some heavy damage, and if the Altaria already has previous damage, it could allow you to take it out. Lorma also included Skarmory into the Air Force here, and it is kind of the bottom of the crew, kind of a weaker pick. I could see how someone could maybe, you know, big brain it into their attack team in some effective way. I just don't think it's a very effective counter. Lorma also agrees that it is a pretty weak member of the crew there, so I don't know. Skarmory, you might want to include it, but it doesn't really handle Lucario very well because it's Flying Steel type, so it takes neutral damage from Lucario, and it doesn't do any effective hits onto Lucario. It's all like neutral hits because fighting in Steel makes the Flying type neutral. So yeah, and then Blaziken might give it some trouble too. So I don't know. Skarmory, not a bad pick, but a little bit more of a questionable one. And then finally, we got the Lapras Corner, right? And Lapras's main job is taking down things that beat Lucario. So sort of like the shield for the sword, but Bastidon's already the shield, so it's the scabbard. Let's go with that. Yeah, so Lapras is the scabbard for the sword to protect it from the things that hurt the sword. Yeah, so Lapras, yeah, beats down on the flying types because it's got the ice type attacks, and then beats down on Blaziken here with the water type attacks. So really good. I'd say the preferred moveset in this particular cup would be the Water Gun moveset, because then that gives you some additional threat onto the Bastidon, who is a rock type Pokemon, and then it'll also let you put in some more hurt on Lucario. That said, if you want to go with Frost Breath or Ice Shard in order to handle the Dragon type threats a little bit more handily, then that's definitely advisable. I think Ice Beam does the job well enough, but if you don't have the Ice Beam because it's a legacy move, then you might want to consider using the Frost Breath. Ultimately, it comes down to what your team composition is and what threats you want to handle more than other threats. Personally, I'm in favor of Water Gun because you can also hurt these guys a little bit more. So that's my personal opinion on the Lapras matter. And then right next to Lapras, we've got Celia. Celia was the Lapras analog in the Tempest Cup, if you remember, being able to do Lapras's job there while also beating Lapras. That's kind of the same case here, but I feel like Lapras's main claim to fame in the Kingdom Cup is the water type damage, which Celia doesn't do as well as Lapras. But dialing it back a little bit more, Lapras is still going to lose more often than not to the steel type Lucario guys up here. Celia will lose to them too, and then Celia will still have the same advantages in these matchups because of the ice type damage. So ultimately, it's up to you which water ice boy you want to use. I'd say Lapras definitely carries the advantage though because of Water Gun and Surf, which is something Celia doesn't have access to. So make your pick. So to summarize, the main picks here: Lucario, Ultimate Sword Boy, beats the Ultimate Shield, which is Bastidon. Bastidon beats down on the Air Force and I guess the Scabbard for the sword here, the Water Ice Boys, which is very important, very potent. If you want to handle both of these threats and you don't have either of them, then you might want to pair up Blaziken with Flygon to just double down on beating these guys that you don't have. Melmetal can make a good alternative to Bastidon, ultimately loses to Bastidon, and isn't as clear-cut and powerful as Bastidon is, but is still quite good, so it can make a very good alternative. Then you've got the water ice types here, the Scabbards, right? They beat down on the things that beat Lucario, and if you are using Lucario, then that's going to be very important for you. And even if you're not using Lucario, well then you're definitely using Blaziken, and it definitely protects Blaziken in a way. So Blaziken's like the alternative sword that this is scabbarding there, right? Then you got the Air Force, which is beaten down by the Scabbard, and the Air Force's main job is to beat down on the Lucario, take down the sword, right? And then they also take down the things that take down the sword. So also a good inclusion for them in the meta. And then yeah, rounding it back up, we got Blaziken and Flygon again, which are like the anti-meta picks. They beat down on the sword and the shield quite well. Would that make them like the hammer or the axe? But then swords can kind of get around them. So they'd be like the spear? Yeah, I'll call these guys the spear because they got more reach than the sword and then they can get around the shield. Let's go with that. So those are the main picks for the Kingdom Cup. As I said before, I will be covering the alternative options, the wild cards, tonight in my live stream SwagTips at 7 p.m. Central Time on the Twitch channel, SwagTips. I stream every Thursday around 7 p.m. Central Time if you are curious. And if you're coming to this video a little bit late, I can't make the live stream or something like that, well, the video cut will be on YouTube in the next couple days, so you can check it out then. You might be able to check it out right away if you subscribe to SwagTips, get notified the moment it's on. Subscribing to me might be a good idea. I don't know. You tell me. Oh yeah, and of course, if you got any questions, feel free to comment below, let me know, and I'll be happy to help you out. Oh yeah, and if you guys are aware, the dates for GoFest have been announced. Yeah, so I'm definitely going to be taking off that weekend and hitting up GoFest again. It's in Chicago. I'm in Wisconsin. There's no excuse for me not to go, right? The main day I plan on attending the event is Friday, but if I can't do Friday, I'll try to do Saturday, and if I can't do those, then I'll probably have to do Sunday. So I will give you guys updates on that as I get them. A great way to get updates from the Swagman is to follow me on Twitter.